What is up, guys, and welcome to my review of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Now, I am somebody who grew up in the 90s during the big heyday of Sonic video games on the Sega Genesis, so I've always had a lot of nostalgic love for Sonic. Actually, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was my first video game that I ever played in my entire life. So, got a lot of love for the character, and I've been really pleasantly surprised with this franchise so far. I didn't expect much out of the first film. Of course, there was that whole controversy with the first trailer, and you had ugly Sonic, and the fans freaked out, and the studio went, okay, we'll fix it. And luckily, this is one of those times where the fans were right, and the studio listened. First film was really entertaining. Second film was even better. I think there's a solid argument for saying that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is probably the best video game adaptation we've ever gotten as far as a movie goes. That's kind of sad, but I think that it might be the best one. So I've been excited about what they're going to do with this third film. We got the tease for Shadow at the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, a character that I'm not overly familiar with, but certainly know a bit about him. And the trailers have looked great. The casting of Keanu Reeves certainly excites me. I'm a big fan of him. And so I took my daughter to go check this movie out today. And while there is still a number of things that I think they could do better here, we have not had a Sonic film that I think has completely knocked it out of the park. If you enjoy the previous two films, you'll most certainly enjoy this third one. Now, while Sonic's speed allows him to do pretty much all the tasks that he wants to get done during the day, those of us with regular human speed can sometimes struggle to meal prep or to prepare dinner for our family, especially during the busy holiday season. So check out the sponsor of today's video, Factor 75. Well, the holidays are here and things are getting busy. Come to think of it, are they ever not busy? Between Christmas shopping, having the kids off school, maybe even planning some reunions or vacations for the holidays, it is so easy to lose track of time and lose the ability to prepare meals for you and your family. Well, Factor Meals makes all that so much easier with ready-to-eat meals that are chef-prepared and ready in 2 minutes. And even though it's the holidays, you can still strive towards your summer wellness goals with options like keto, calorie smart, and even protein plus. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success by allowing you to skip the grocery store, the prep, and the cleanup, and enjoy chef-crafted and dietitian-approved meals, all delivered right to your door. And with over 34 chef-prepared and dietitian-approved meals, there's a variety of weekly options that will never allow you to fall victim to food fatigue. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with over 55 different add-ons, such as apple cinnamon pancakes or fruit smoothies. So if you want to make everyday eating during the holiday busy season much easier on you, then use my link in the video description below or scan the QR code to get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box. That's 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box by scanning the QR code on screen or visiting the link in the video description below. And thank you to Factor 75 for sponsoring today's video. Starting off with the positives for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, just like the previous two films, especially the second film, I just love the characters. I love the dynamics with all of the animated characters. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles. There's fun to be had with some of the human characters, and I'll get more into that later. But overall, the characters that we go to these movies for, I think they just pull off well. I think their personalities match up well. You got kind of the speed in Sonic, you got the brains in Tails, you got the muscle in Knuckles, and especially with this film kind of balancing off of what we ended up in Sonic 2, where Knuckles has now become a part of the family and is more of a friendly dynamic to this group as opposed to an antagonist. I love the dynamic that he brought as just kind of like this brute meathead. And I think that that personality suits that character well. There's really good humor between all of them. And all kids have their favorite Sonic character. And I think the way that they are characterized in these movies are there to make these kids smile. My daughter loves Knuckles. That's her favorite character in this entire group. And she was very happy with everything that she saw.
Are you Detective Pikachu?
He does look like a Pokemon. Pika Pika!
I was very happy to find out that Jim Carrey was not, in fact, going to retire from acting, and he came back to do Robotnik yet again, and he's one of the best elements of this movie, just like he was one of the best elements of the previous two films. If you had told me in the 90s that eventually there's going to be Sonic the Hedgehog films and Jim Carrey is going to play Dr. Robotnik, I would have told you that's just too good to be true. I almost wish that I could bring little Cody into this time period and just sit him down and let him watch these movies and just go nuts, because Jim Carrey has always been like a comedy god for the most part. Him and Adam Sandler and a couple others were like the comedy titans of my childhood. And it's been great to see him get back into a role like this, because he really taps into the Jim Carrey that we loved back when he exploded onto the scene with things like The Mask and Dumb and Dumber. And he continues to do just a lot of fun things with this character. And he's actually doing double duty in this movie because he's playing Robotnik as well as Robotnik's grandfather, who are similar characters, but there's just enough different about them that it's a really fun little duology there to see them playing off of each other and to see their own little ticks and their own little personalities. So I really enjoyed seeing Jim Carrey back. I hope he comes back for the fourth one and the fifth one and however many Sonic movies that we have, because he's just one of the best elements of this franchise. Pretty much across the board, everybody has said that the biggest issues with the first two Sonic films is that there's way too much time and focus spent on the human characters, and it's always a distraction from what we actually come to these movies to see. And Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is the first time that it seems like they are yet again listening to the fans, and they are addressing that. You do get some focus on the human characters like James Marsden and his wife here, but they're more a part of the plot. Like, they're there when it's necessary for them to be there. We're not taking a commercial break to go to a wedding or anything like that, or going on a road trip where it feels like we should be doing something more interesting with the Sonic characters. This is predominantly focused on Team Sonic, Shadow, and the Robotniks, and that is the best recipe for a movie like this, and they need to keep that focus going forward. So not only did I enjoy the human characters more because I felt like I got just enough of them and they were utilized to their strengths, but the movie just flowed so much better, being able to give full plot focus and 95% of our attention to the characters that we want to spend the time with. As far as the humor in this movie, I almost put it in the mix because I have to be honest with you, there's a number of jokes that didn't quite get a chuckle out of me, but there's a lot of really good pop culture references in here that got a genuine laugh out of me that I decided to keep it here in the positive column. So I don't want to spoil any of them, but some of them are involved with other like movies out there. Some of them are involved with 90s pop culture references involving video games and things that we used to have to do back in the 90s with our video games. So every time that they had one of those jokes, that seemed to be the most clever bit of humor we had in the movie, and I got some serious laughs out of them. And the final thing that I'll say is just overall, they have really set themselves up for a really nice and potentially long-running franchise here. None of these movies have been amazing so far, but they've all been good. They've all been really entertaining for me as an adult, as an old school fan of Sonic, and especially as a father where I can take my kids and I can enjoy my nostalgia while sharing something from my youth with them that they have kind of a different love for because they grew up in a different era of Sonic. So continuing to add in new characters to Team Sonic, continuing to bring in new villains, continuing to expand on Dr. Robotnik. I think that they have a lot of juice left to squeeze here with this one, and from what we have been teased in the mid-credit scene of this film, I'm really excited, and my daughter was especially excited for where they are hinting things are going to go in the future. So while this is a franchise that certainly is self-aware, they know the types of movies that they're making, and they seemingly hit pretty well with most people that are going for them, there's a lot of potential here to just keep that running for at least another 2 or 3 movies, I think. Now moving on to the mixed aspects, and I am leaning mixed positive on this one, but I was actually a bit mixed on Shadow. Shadow is your main antagonist character in this movie. He's the darker colored hedgehog with the red highlights. He's voiced by Keanu Reeves. He's got like these skate shoes. He wields a gun and has a motorbike at one point. All of these things are straight from the video games. Now, the things that I like about Shadow is that he's a much darker character than anything else we've gotten in this franchise. Every other person, even the other villains, are very focused on comedy and very focused on bits. Even when they're trying to be antagonistic, there's usually a joke in there somewhere with Robotnik and even with Knuckles in the last film. Shadow is not playing around. Shadow is not joking around. Shadow is dead serious. And I think that was an interesting little tonal shift to have here. You know, he's a very tragic character, which we have not really explored in this franchise yet. So I enjoyed that side of it. I think he looks badass. He's very imposing physically. Like from the very first time you see these characters try to go blow for blow with Shadow, it shows how extremely overpowered he is compared to them. So I think he's a really interesting character that there's potential to unpack him a little bit further, even from what we do in this movie. The issues that I have with it is that because he is such a serious character, I feel like he's kept at arm's distance from me really enjoying him the way that I enjoy Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. I feel like there is an element to him that's almost so deadpan serious that I don't have the ties to him. I don't have the love for him that I like really want to see what they're going to do with him next, the way that I left Sonic 2 feeling for characters like Knuckles and even Robotnik in the last couple of films, this one included. Also with Keanu Reeves' voice acting, I don't know if I'm going to be on an island with this one. I've always been a big fan of Keanu Reeves, and I know it's been the running joke for almost his entire career. People call him the best, worst actor of all time, because he's very limited in his range and what he can do for most people, but yet he just continues to deliver a really good version of what he's capable of and pick these awesome movies and these awesome franchises where, especially as an action star, he's been there for like every kind of resurgence and reinvention of the action genre my entire lifetime. But I've always felt him to be a lot more talented of an actor than people give him credit for. But I feel like ever since John Wick 2, maybe John Wick 3, it's almost like he has just decided to become what people have always said that he is. And so mostly what I'm talking about is the way that he expresses things, the way that he conveys things from a dialogue standpoint. They're very emotionless. And I know somehow there's a lot of people out there that's kind of what they love about Keanu Reeves. They say it's like the John Wick voice. And I've even heard people say that Shadow's like John Wick of this universe because of the way that he talks. But I'm kind of wore thin on that version of Keanu Reeves, where everything that he says is like this, and it never changes tone or inflection or speed or emotion. You can work that into the character of Shadow for the most part because of the type of character that he is, but I just wanted more variety out of what we were getting from Keanu Reeves. Something like what he did with Duke Kaboom, something with a little bit more personality in there. He's capable of it because he's always given us characters with personality, whether you go back to Johnny Utah, whether you go to his character in Speed, or you go even back to Neo. It's really just been in this later half of the John Wick franchise that he's kind of just dialed into this deadpan version of Keanu Reeves. And I just want more from him. I know he's capable of it. He's given it before. I'm wore thin on that version of Keanu Reeves.
One hedgehog to another. Who does your highlights?
The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
And the last part of the mix here is that the backstory for Shadow, which they kind of dive into a little bit throughout the movie, it kind of failed to really suck me in as interesting because a lot of it is told without dialogue. A lot of it is just like these images that he sees in his head as he's, focusing on something, or he's, it's expressing his grief. And I failed to really be hit emotionally about all of that. Now, is that too high of an expectation for a Sonic the Hedgehog movie? Perhaps, perhaps I'm being a little too harsh on it, but I wanted a little bit more out of feeling his tragedy. It felt like they just kind of told it to me instead of like showed it to me, if that makes sense. So overall, I enjoyed Shadow. I think that he is a good change of pace. I think he serves his purpose well for the story that they're telling here. But if we see more of this character going forward, which I assume we will, I want a little bit more out of him. Now moving on to the negatives. And the one that bugged me the most is that the human villains here, there's like this government organization that's tied in with what's going on with Shadow and what's going on with Grandpa Robotnik. There was a lot of potential there to have them be a really fun presence and much more of a bigger presence in the movie than they actually were. But they didn't really do a whole lot with them. They were very undercooked. And specifically because they have Kristen Ritter as the main person here, the main government agent that is interacting with all these characters, I wanted to see a bit more because she's great, whether she's being a darker character, whether she's being more of a comic booky character, whether she's being a funny character. She's a very talented actress. And so when I saw her on screen, I was like, oh, cool. I love her. And she really only gets one sequence to kind of show any sort of memorable side to her character where she's doing like this physical gag with Jim Carrey's Robotnik character. So I wanted a little bit more. For all the human characters that I don't want to see more of, and I like the fact that they were kept at a minimum. They were ones that I actually would have appreciated a little more screen time from. And going along with that, I felt like the ultimate conflict that is present in our third act, like the big thing that all the characters have to come together to stop, I felt like it was a little bit generic. It certainly paled in comparison to the giant Robotnik Megazord playing Pantera, but ultimately the big thing that they're trying to prevent is like a big giant nuclear thing in the sky, big sky beam thing. And like that's a running gag at this point, that's such a reused plot element for a third act conflict that it just didn't really hit me that much. So could have used a little more creativity there, a little more fun like we got in the last film. And the last thing that I'll say is really not a negative on this movie whatsoever, but just something that I feel like is worth mentioning because it ties into my experience with the movie. We've officially kind of passed my generation of Sonic fan. So I was a big fan of the Sega Genesis games, Sonic 1, 2, 3, Sonic and Knuckles. I played a little bit of Sonic Generations, or whatever the one was called, on the GameCube. I kind of tapped out of Sonic right as Shadow came into it. So I had a little familiarity with Shadow, but for the most part, Shadow is a character, and certainly everything that is to come after Shadow, all the other characters, good and bad, that have been teased and have yet to be teased, I have no knowledge of, no nostalgia for, no warm and fuzzies whenever I see them teased in a post-credit scene, or, you know, the joy of expecting maybe they're going to show up later on. So I think that Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 are the only films in this franchise that are going to have that extra little something special for me, that nostalgia, that childlike joy of seeing things from my youth brought to life. I think we have run out of that for me. So again, not a negative on this movie. Of course, they need to continue to go, and that's going to be great for kids like mine, the newer generation of Sonic fans. But for us old school folks, unfortunately, I think the nostalgia tank has run thin. And I don't know if that's going to affect my experience with further films. It affected it with this one a little bit. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed this one. It was a fun movie to see with my daughter. I definitely recommend going out and see it as a family this weekend. And I still prefer the second film a little bit, but this one is not far below that. Just had a little bit more fun with Knuckles and some of the sequences in the second one. But it was a good flick if you enjoyed these movies. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my other 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put a playlist up here of all of my Sonic reviews because I've reviewed all 3 films at this point. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.